much milk can a goat really produce? Today, I'm breaking down how much milk you can expect from different breeds, stages of life, and points in lactation so you can make the best decisions for your homestead. If we haven't met before, hi, I'm Sarah from the Nest in the West. I'm a homeschool mama to 4 kiddos. I'm a small-scale flower farmer, and I teach homesteaders holistic goat care and goat milk cheese making in my online courses and my new membership, the Dairy Goat Collective. Before bringing home your dairy goats, it's really helpful to know how much milk you can expect them to produce. It helps you decide how many goats you need, which breeds best suit your goals, and whether to start with young doelings or established does already in milk. Now, the amount of milk that you can expect a dairy goat to give really is very subjective. Breed is a really great guideline for getting started, but even that can vary based on genetics. So you might have a really quality bred Nigerian dwarf goat, which traditionally would give less milk than a standard size breed. But if she's been bred with amazing milking genetics, she may outproduce a Nubian standard size goat that just wasn't bred with good milking lines in mind. I really think that more basic than anything else, you need to be looking at the genetics. And it's why I really recommend getting started with quality goats from a breeder who is intentional. It doesn't mean that the breeder has to have a lot of goats and they have a huge breeding program, or that the goats even need to be terribly expensive. But as long as you are getting goats from someone who is thoughtful about the genetics of their goats, understands it a bit, and can tell you what their breeding goals are, I think that's a good place to start. Other things that play into the amount of milk that you can expect a goat to give are their age, their stage of lactation, how many kiddings they've had, and their overall health. It's really important to ask a lot of questions of the breeder when you are setting out to buy your first dairy goats. Ideally, the breeder is going to be able to give you a lot of information about that goat's history or the history of their dam and sire. Grand dam, may go down the line quite a bit, but I highly recommend asking a lot of questions to help you know what you can expect your individual goat to produce. Now, generally speaking, standard sized goats give a lot more milk than a mini goat. So some standard well-known dairy breeds would be Nubians, Saanens, Alpines, or La Mancha. These are all goats that are large breeds, and they have been bred as high-producing dairy goats, and they're great homestead milkers. And each one of these breeds has certain characteristics that tend to be emblematic of the breed as a whole. For example, a Nubian goat is a high-producing and high butterfat breed. A Saanen is another high-producing breed, but they do have a slightly lower butterfat. And a Nigerian dwarf goat is a low-producing breed comparatively, but they do have the highest butterfat. So if you're looking at things like cheese making, you're going to get higher yields with their milk. Some really classic breeds for homesteaders are Nubians, Nigerian dwarf, and La Manchas. There's so many other amazing goat breeds out there, so you definitely don't need to be limited to these ones, but these are some of the classic breeds that tend to do really well on a homestead scale. Here on our farm, we breed mini Nubian dairy goats. I like this breed because they have the best of both worlds, in my opinion. You have the high production and beautiful features of a Nubian goat, with the smaller stature and high butterfat of a Nigerian dwarf. Many Nubians produce a good amount of milk. They're good at converting feed to milk, and they're kind of right in the middle size-wise, so they're still very easily handled and manageable, but they also don't tend to struggle so much with metabolic issues or mastitis or other things that you might deal with a bit more with a very high-producing breed. My mini Nubians produce, on average, about a gallon of milk a day, with twice-a-day milking at their peak lactation. That's a lot of milk for a small breed. There's actually a lot of hybrid breeds out there these days, and there's a whole registry set up around them, the Mini Dairy Goat Association. So these goats are registrable hybrids, and by 6 generations down, you achieve purebred status with them. I highly recommend, if you are trying to determine the right breed for your homestead, you may want to consider some of these mini breeds. There are mini Nubians, mini Saanens, mini Guernseys, mini La Manchas, you name it. If there is a standard goat breed out there, you could probably breed it to a Nigerian dwarf and get a mini version. This year, I am milking 5 does, and we're getting right now about 3 gallons a day. Now, this is because one of those goats is 12 years old and this is her last lactation and I'm not pushing her for production. I'm actually not really pushing any of my goats for production. We are milking once a day. They're still nursing their kids and I'm able to lower their production to an amount that feels really manageable for me. But even with getting 3 gallons a day from those 5 goats, that is a lot of milk. That is 21 gallons a week. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot more milk than my family of 6 can consume in a week. So what do we do with it all? Well, I like an abundance of milk for a few reasons. One, I like to have milk that I can sell to my local community. Currently, I'm just selling to a friend or two, but I love being able to provide a really nourishing quality milk to my friends and family when they need it. I also have excess to make all of our family's dairy products. We do not buy dairy from the store except for butter. I do buy butter. You can make goat milk butter. I don't love using a cream separator. I don't love having to deal with the skim milk after that. So at this season of my life, I am totally fine to buy butter. But everything else we produce right here. We make a lot of yogurt and soft cheeses and mozzarella. And then all summer long, I am busy in the kitchen making hard cheeses to age, and that provides all of our cheese for the entire year. This last year, we also ventured into making goat milk soap, and so now we provide all of our family's soap and shampoo with our goat milk, and we get to use the goat tallow from the males that we raise for meat every year too. So it's really full circle. Now, to determine how many goats you're gonna need and what breed is best for your homestead, it's great to start thinking about your goals. How much milk does your family consume on a weekly basis? And what are your goals with that milk? Do you want to have excess to sell or feed other animals on your farm? Do you intend to dabble in some cheese making and yogurt with soft cheeses and mozzarella? Do you intend to make some goat milk soap? Do you want to experiment with aged cheese making or even do what my family does and produce all of your family's dairy products? That's going to say a lot about how much milk you need on a weekly basis for your family. When you are thinking about this, it's helpful to know some ratios here. So when you are making an aged hard cheese, you can expect approximately 1 pound of cheese for every gallon of milk. So a good sized wheel of cheese, I'm usually using 6 gallons of milk for, and it produces about a 6-pound wheel of cheese. And you would be surprised how little time it takes to go through that when you're shredding it up and using it in cheese crisps and casseroles and all the other things you might put cheese into when you're cooking from scratch at home. When you're talking about making something like yogurt, that is a 1-to-1 ratio as far as how much milk you start with and how much yogurt you end up with. Unless, of course, you like to strain your yogurt to get a thicker Greek-style yogurt, then that's entirely up to you how thick you like your yogurt and how much whey you're straining off. Goat milk soap actually takes very little milk, just a few ounces per loaf, and each loaf could make 10 to 12 bars, depending on how thick you like them. So that doesn't take very much goat milk at all. And you might think through what sorts of dairy products you use on a regular basis. We use Chev, that's soft goat cheese. We use that in place of anything that would require cream cheese. We use a really thick yogurt in place of sour cream. There's all sorts of little hacks you can use when you're making goat milk products to replace the cow milk products you're used to buying from a grocery store. Next, you're gonna wanna think about how many goats you have room and capacity to keep. If you only have a rather small space, but you know you want to provide a lot of milk for your family, you may wanna start with 2 standard dairy does, knowing that they could have the potential to give you 2 to 3 gallons a day each if you're milking twice a day, and they're established does. And then you can keep a buck. So with just 3 goats, you could produce a lot of milk each week for your family. Or perhaps you want smaller animals, you need something that's easier to handle, whether because you have small children or you're getting on in life, or for whatever reason, you need smaller animals. Maybe keeping several smaller dairy goats is going to be a better option for you. Another important factor to think about is what is available around you. What breeds have good keepers and breeders nearby that you could learn from and purchase quality animals from? Do you have a market for those babies that will be born each year? Babies are part of the equation when you're raising dairy. Every year, their doe needs to freshen to produce more milk. Do you have buyers in your area who are interested in buying that breed of goat? And maybe that's not a factor for you. Maybe you intend to really grow your herd. You're going to keep all the doelings each year and maybe raise the bucklings up for meat. Maybe that's an option for you too. But it's helpful to think through what is local to you? What options do you have for buying and selling goats? If you have a large family and you're wanting to replace all of your dairy needs, you're probably going to want some higher producing goats. But if you're a small family or a single person, just 1 or 2 smaller goats might be a really great fit for you and still provide enough milk for all of your needs. So now that you have a good idea of how much milk you're going to want to produce and which breeds might be a good fit for you, you're going to want to determine whether it's best for you to start with established dairy does that are already in milk, or if you're going to want to get started with young doelings. Now, there's pros and cons to each of these. If you are an absolute beginner, I really do recommend getting started with established goats that are already trained to milk, they're already in milk. That just cuts your learning curve by quite a bit. However, usually buying goats in milk is more expensive. You may be getting the cast-offs of a different herd. Usually breeders aren't selling their very best goats in milk. Now, there are definitely options to be able to purchase goats in milk from amazing breeders, and those goats will be high quality, wonderful animals to get started with. But it is worth thinking about. Make sure you're not just getting a bargain animal that is kind of the cast-off because they have something a little bit wrong with them. Goats in milk can also be more expensive, so that's worth considering too. On the flip side, getting started with doelings is a really great way to get some really quality animals for an affordable price. It's also a really fun experience to get started with baby goats, and you get to raise them up to adulthood, see them through their first kidding, and teach them to milk. Be aware that first fresheners, that is a first time milking goat, take a lot of training to get used to the process of being on a milk stand and being milked. You have to have the fortitude and the patience to teach them and learn yourself at the same time. It's also worth noting that you will need a good plan in place for how you will be getting those doelings pregnant. You don't want to just go buy some really cute doelings, some quality goats, bring them home, and then all of a sudden it's autumn and it's time to breed them, and you are thinking to yourself, I don't have a buck, I don't know anyone with a buck. How am I going to get these goats bred and finally start getting some milk? So you're going to either want to purchase a buck yourself so you have breeding options on your own farm, or know someone who has a buck that you could rent or lease or work something out with. It's also worth keeping in mind that it really does take a couple years to start seeing the true potential for production from a goat. First fresheners, generally speaking, don't produce a whole lot of milk. Their first year, they are producing enough to feed their babies and hopefully a little bit more for you. By their second year, they're producing quite a bit more, and it's really when you hit that third year that you start to see what their capacity for production is. But if you have the patience for the long haul, getting started with doelings is a really fun and rewarding experience to get you started on your milk goat journey. One last thing worth keeping in mind when it comes to whether you want to buy goats that are already in milk or young doelings is that goats produce varying amounts of milk over the course of their lactation. So when they first have their babies, they are producing enough milk for their kids, and if they're a high producing goat, they're producing extra that you need to be taking as well. Their supply is going to gradually increase over those first 6 weeks or so. And by the time you hit that 6-week mark, they are at peak production. They need a lot of good nutrition and help to maintain their health and energy levels as they're pumping out so much milk. And also, if you want to keep that really high production that they're experiencing at that time, you need to be taking that milk on a daily basis, sometimes twice a day. Now, once they hit that peak lactation, they can maintain that for a few months if you are continuing to give them enough inputs such as hay and grain and milk them regularly. If you are relying on the babies as backup milkers pretty frequently, or you're not milking every single day, you are going to lower their production a bit. And that's fine if that's what you want, but just keep in mind that their production is very much in direct correlation to your demand on their supply. Milk is a very demand and supply relationship. It's not supply and demand. Now, your goat is going to maintain approximately the same amount of milk, barring something like a health issue that could lower her supply. She's going to maintain her supply for the next few months until she hits breeding season again. As the days start to get shorter, most goats are seasonal breeders, and so those shortening days trigger their heat cycles to begin again. And so it also begins to taper their supply downward from that point. Once you've bred your goats, their supply will gradually lessen and lessen, and you're going to want to dry them off completely at least 2 months before they kid again to give their body time to replenish their energy stores and put all of its focus on growing healthy kids. So what you're experiencing in a goat's milk production at the end of her lactation is going to be very different than what you're experiencing at 6 weeks post-kidding at the beginning of her lactation. So those are my tips for determining how much milk you can expect from dairy goats, what to expect from different breeds, and how stage of life and season of lactation affect your milk supply, and how to figure out how much milk your family actually needs. Hopefully, this helped bring a little more clarity to this subject and helps you make the best decisions for your homestead. If you found this video helpful, I'd love for you to stick around and subscribe for more dairy goat and cheese making videos every week. And if you're ready to go deeper, I'd love to support you on your goat journey. The Dairy Goat Collective is my membership community where homesteaders like you get ongoing support in learning holistic goat care. You can find more information in the links below. Thanks so much for watching, friends. I'm cheering you on in your goat journey, and I'll see you in the next video.